thank you guys all for joining us, and thank you to Graeme for being here. We're so excited to celebrate these two wonderful books. So I just wanted to start out by talking about how these two books came to be and your path to becoming a writer.
How long have you got?
Let's do the short version.
Okay. Wow. How about I take you as far as the Rosie Project? Okay,
Let's do that,
and
yes.
I'll do it as quick as I can. So I did sort of nothing very much for the first 40-something years of my life. I was running a business consultancy and so on. And then, can I say this loudly because we're in a bookstore? Is it still open? I read the book that changed my life.
What book would that be?
And that was a book by Joe Queenan, the film critic, called The Unkindest Cut. It describes how Joe sets out to make a feature film, full-length movie, for $7,000. He was trying to emulate Robert Rodriguez, who had famously made the film El Mariachi in Mexico for $7,000, which he raised by selling his own blood. And Joe didn't sell any blood. Joe just took the money out in a credit card. He made this film. He spent too much money on it. He just kept putting money into it, almost destroyed his marriage. And the film was a turkey. And I read this book and I said to my wife, we've got to do this. She said, what do we mean, we, white man? So we went through this, and anyway, we made this film. And I actually adapted a novel, an unpublished novel that she had written. And anyway, we made this film, and when it was 97 minutes, and it was a turkey, and I played the, well, if you want an idea of how bad it was, I played the lead romantic role, okay? Okay, so I played the male lead romantic role. My wife played the female lead. She was fine. But we showed this at a cinema for 300 of our best friends on her major birthday, and it should have been the end of it, except a film producer who was in the audience saw it and said, there was a lot of things not to like about this movie, but at least the guy who did the screenplay knew what he was doing. Was me. And so I did the obvious thing, which was to sell my business and enroll in an undergraduate qualification in screenwriting at the local college.
As you do.
As you do. I with my wife's full support, after I promised to keep up the day job, so I was still doing freelance consulting. So I then did 5 years of study in screenwriting, part-time. Why did it take 5 years? It was a 2-year course, but I went back and repeated things, and I had a job and all that sort of stuff. And the project I started on, right from the beginning, I thought I've got to work on something that I can apply my learning to. So when I go home at night after learning some cool thing, I can apply it immediately to the screenplay I'm working on. And the screenplay I started right at the beginning, eventually started off it was a drama about a physicist. His name was Don Tillman, and it was called The Face of God. And it eventually became the Clara Project. And after 2.5 years, the Clara Project got tossed in the trash. And the only things I took out of the trash were the character of Don Tillman. I changed it from physicist to geneticist. One little incident known as the jacket incident stayed all the way. It was the first thing I wrote, and it was still there at the end. So it was quite cool. And so 2.5 years later, after 5 years, I had a thing called the Rosie Project, and we couldn't get it funded to make it as a movie. It won a prize for best unproduced screenplay, a romantic comedy screenplay, but we couldn't find the money. And the thing that my producer said to me was, the trouble is these days nobody wants an original screenplay, at least not one from an unknown writer. What they want to do is adapt a best-selling novel because the audience is already there, we know it's proven. So I rewrote it as a novel.
And why did you find that the screenplay lent itself so well to the novel?
Well, I think it wasn't so much that the screenplay lent itself so well to a novel. It was actually that the story turned out was better told as a novel. The great moment was when I sat down to write the novel, and I wrote the first word, and the first word was I. Something that my teacher when I was 8 years old had told me not to do. But never start an essay with I. But I started it with I, and at that moment, first person, instead of seeing this guy who's a bit strange up on the screen and watching him from the outside saying, oh, there's a weird guy, there's Sheldon Cooper or whatever you want to call it, we're in his head. We actually understand the logic of what he's doing. He gets to tell the story the way he wants to tell it. And every word on those pages is his voice, except the dialogue of other people. So I knew almost you just sort of a few paragraphs in, look, this is the way to tell the story. It's better this way. And I wrote that in 4 weeks. I mean, it went really quickly, but because so much work had been done, and 3 weeks of editing after that, so it was 7 weeks before I sent it to a publisher. But so much work had been done in story-wise in a screenplay, and I knew I had to add Don's inner world, but I knew it intimately because, in fact, if you're a good screenwriter, when the actor turns to you and says, I got to play Don Tillman, what's my motivation? Why do I do this? You have to be able to explain it. So I just put that on the page.
So how do you get into Don's head? Because he's such a strict, specific type of voice.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I don't identify as having Asperger's syndrome. So, and people often ask me that question. It's a fair one. I don't, so I'm not Don Tillman. I mean, people say, are you Don Tillman? I don't know if Bret Easton Ellis gets this, but you kill women? It's like, no, I'm not Don Tillman, but I have to be able, it's the point of being an author, you have to be able to make it up. But I draw on a couple of things. One is I spent many, many years hanging out with people like Don. And look, there were two reasons for it. One was I was attracted into the technical areas. And if you get into technical areas, you'll find some of the people in technical areas are very like Don. And the other was that because I was very good at math and science and that, I ended up, and I changed countries from New Zealand to Australia, I ended up being put up 2 years. So I was in a class with people 2 years older than me. Let me tell you, when you are a 13-year-old boy in a class full of 15-year-old girls, you are never going to get a date, ever. It's just not going to happen. And so I was sort of socially awkward in that because I was 2 years younger. So I hung out with the other socially awkward people and techie people, so I was meeting a lot of people like Don. And the other thing I do, and you get, there are people I respected too. They were still are many friends and colleagues. And then when I was working through information technology, I met lots of people like that. And then one of the tricks I use to get into Don's headspace is I imagine I'm working on a technical problem. Because if you and I work on a technical problem together, we're trying to fix a computer program, I'm not going to say to you, how would you feel if we change that? It's like, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it correct? Is it incorrect? Will this work? Will it not work? It's a pragmatic, technical, objective way of looking at things. And I just say, okay, well, let's take that into a social situation. So that's how it's going to be. Facts, evidence, as though you're working on a computer program.
Right. When you were imagining Don's match, when you were imagining Rosie, how did you construct someone who you really thought could be the right person for Don?
With great difficulty. It's a good question to ask. Because the two hardest things about writing the Rosie Project, the first was getting Don's voice. Not so much his personality, his voice, exactly authentically right, so that it was consistent on the page and didn't falter, because the book was going to be written in that voice. So that was and then the next toughest thing was getting the Rosie character right, because originally she was Clara. She was a nerdy Hungarian physicist. I made her someone we would all imagine Don being with, right? If they're interested in physics together, they meet over a chess game, they are made for each other, okay? But it wasn't challenging enough. And when you're writing, you want to up drama, you want to up conflict, because that ups comedy as well. So I wanted someone who, on the surface, was absolutely the opposite of what Don wanted. So she would fail the wife questionnaire, but on the other hand, was what he needed, and it had to work both ways. I didn't want what they call the stereotypical manic pixie dream girl, who's really only there for Don. And when the actress says, what's my motivation? You say, just to be there for Don. Like, hello, how are you going to be this highly intellectual, smart, sassy person? Say, I'm just here for this guy. So she had to have a need as well, which she wouldn't recognise. It had to be a subconscious need. So I got a lot of help here from my wife. My wife is a woman, and which helps a lot when you're trying to understand. It's funny, but we'd like to pretend that that the genders are very similar and all that sort of stuff. But let me tell you, men almost always find it easier to write men, and women almost always find it easier to write women. It's just one of those things you see in writing. So I got a lot of help from my wife. A, because she's a woman. B, she's a psychiatrist. So we talked a lot about what Rosie's backstory might be, all of that. And she was a huge help. People say, she's a shrink. She would have helped you a lot with Don. I said, not at all. Not at all. She just, let me tell you, psychiatrists are not very good at dealing with people like Don. A lot of people like Don have got some very unhappy stories with encounters with psychiatry and that, because, they come to, Don's got Asperger's, okay? I never said he had Asperger's in the first book because I didn't do any study on Asperger's.
Right.
I didn't do any, except when people say, what study did you do on Asperger's? And I say, 30 years in information technology. I mean, what more do you want? But so when I found that if I put that word there, people started being only interested in Asperger's and not interested in Don. That was a real problem. So I left that out, and then after the book was written, I would say to people, "Has he got Asperger's?" I say, "How do I know? I'm not a psychologist." And then one day I sat down with a guy. His name's Tony Atwood, and he's a guru in Asperger's syndrome. Yep. Professor Tony Atwood. We had lunch together, and I said, "Well, you say I don't know Don." He says, "Listen, I'm a psychologist. I'm an expert in Asperger's. Don Tillman has Asperger's." So that's from the expert. So where was I leading here? I'm saying that Don's got Asperger's. Do you remember where I was going with this conversation?
We were talking about Rosie, but it's a good place to go no matter what.
Oh yeah. Sorry?
How is Rosie the perfect match for Don?
Oh, yeah, that's way back. I drifted way away from that question. I was talking about Asperger's, but how is Rosie the perfect match for Don? Look, I mean, I got a character who I thought was the perfect match, or as good as we get for Don. One of the reasons that Don needs Rosie is that she gets him, okay? And the absolute key moment there is when she turns the clock back so that he can make his dinner according to the right timetable. And one of my writers group told me that. At one point it was Don who did that. And of course that takes us nowhere. And she said, if Rosie did that, I think it was Clara back then, if Clara, whoa, and it was just a huge, that's how it works. That's how she gets him. And what she's looking for, in a way, is she doesn't trust men. They've let her down. Her dad wasn't who he's supposed to be. It turns out he's not a real father. And then and so she's suspicious of men in general. And Don is absolutely reliable. He is completely safe. He's not, he's never going to hurt her. He can look after himself. He can do all those manly things, but at the same time, he is exactly what he says he is.
So the next place I want to go is to the Rosie Effect. But before we do that, I would love to have you read.
Okay, so I'll read something from the Rosie Effect, okay? But I've got a passage here that probably won't give too much away. Who hasn't read the Rosie Project? Come on, fess up. Rosie Project, okay? So you've all read the Rosie Project? You know how it ends. You haven't?
I was just in the bookstore today. So
Block your. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. We need more people like you because I can sell you 2 books tonight. But so this is not too spoilery. To solve the immediate nutrition problem, I selected a vegetarian recipe at random from one of the websites. A jog via Trader Joe's sufficed to source all the necessary ingredients for a tofu and squash flan. I was left with an afternoon of unscheduled time. An ideal opportunity to do some research in line with Jean's advice. It seemed wise to delay the shower and change until after my excursion, especially as the weather forecast indicated a 30% probability of rain. I put my light raincoat on over my jogging costume and added a cycling hat for hair protection. There was a small playground on 10th Avenue, only a few blocks away. It was perfect. I was able to sit on a bench alone and watch children with their guardians. Binoculars would have been helpful, but I could observe gross motor actions and even hear some conversation, especially as much of it was shouted. I was not disturbed. In fact, on the sole occasion that a child approached me, it was immediately summoned back. I made several observations in my notebook. The children explored for short distances, but routinely checked in return to their guardians. I recalled seeing a documentary in which this behaviour was made more obvious by fast motion replay. I could not recall what type of animal was involved. My phone had substantial available memory, so I began shooting my own video. Jean would definitely be interested. My recording was interrupted by some kind of communal activity. The guardians and children gathered together for approximately 20 seconds, then moved to the other end of the playground, where my view of them was obscured by a central island of foliage. I followed and sat where I could observe them again. But they did not resume their play. I decided to wait and use the time to change the video resolution on my phone in case there was an opportunity to film a longer segment. Due to my focus on the camera operating task, I did not notice the approach of two uniformed male police officers. In retrospect, I may not have handled the situation well. But it was an unfamiliar social protocol and unexpected circumstances driven by rules I did not know. I was also struggling with the video application, which I downloaded because of its superior compression algorithm without due attention to user friendliness. What do you think you're doing? This was the marginally older policeman. I guess they were both in their 30s and in good physical shape. Body mass indexes approximately 23. I think I'm configuring the resolution, but it's possible I'm doing something different. It's unlikely you will be able to assist unless you're familiar with the application. Well, I guess we should just get out of your way and leave you with the kids. Excellent. Get up. This was an unexpected change of attitude on the part of the younger colleague. Perhaps I was seeing a demonstration of the good cop, bad cop protocol. I looked to good cop to see if I would receive contrary instructions. Do you also require me to stand up? Good cop assisted me to stand. Forcefully. My dislike of being touched is visceral, and my response was similarly automatic. I did not pin or throw my assailant, but I did use a simple Aikido move to disengage and distance him from me. He staggered back and bad cop pulled his gun. Good cop produced handcuffs.
So that happened. Needless to say, if you haven't read The Rosie Effect, you need to do so. Let's talk about how The Rosie Effect came to be and how you knew that The Rosie Project needed a sequel, because obviously it did.
Well, it wasn't obvious to me, because I actually had decided there would be no sequel, and Simon & Schuster, my friends from Simon & Schuster are here, and they're hiding in the back row there. My editor, Karen Marcus, is at the back there. And my deal was that the second book would not be a Rosie Don Tillman book, and everybody was happy with that. And I drafted the second book, rough draft of it, knew where I was going. And then two things really I think drove me to do it. One was people were saying to me, that ending is unrealistic because someone like Don Tillman could never make a successful relationship. I thought, oh yeah, I've seen guys like Don do that. So I wanted to sort of prove that he could do it. And you answer that question. The other one was, you're very lucky to be gifted a comedic character like Don Tillman once in your lifetime. Almost no writers have been given two. I mean, I'm talking about a character who wherever they go, they create comedy. I mean, Don is like a gift for me, that I know if I write a scene, I know if I throw away a scene that's funny, because it's not really serving the story well, that's okay, because I'm going to write another one, and it will still be funny because Don Tillman's in it, that he just gives that, and you have to work to get it more funny, but just him being there will give humour, and that comes out of character. And you think of authors who've had funny characters, most of the time they've got one, or one couple, or something like that. They may have written other books, but typically they're not as laugh out loud funny. So I wanted to use Don again, and I wanted to use him to explore something else that was important to me, because even though these books are comedy, and for many people they just read them on the beach, throw them aside, say, oh, that was a light read. I get a lot of feedback saying light read, and then you get Bill Gates saying profound. And there are people who say, well, it's meant to be. I don't mean that everybody has to look at it and find it profound, but I'm actually, I'm an old guy, I've got a PhD, I'm trying to write something that is important. It's a skeleton that's saying something. People don't want to hear that, that's cool, but if they want to go below it, there should be some substance. And sometimes maybe even that substance is there just unconsciously. So I wanted to explore what makes a relationship work, something that I think is pretty important to most of us. So that's the second book.
How did you decide to bring Don and Rosie to New York?
Well, I made my bed and I had to sleep in it. The thing was, I thought when I finished the Rosie Project that was going to be the end. So that follows on nicely from the last question. So I just wrapped up all the loose ends. There was not going to be any sequel. This is the end. And I thought, well, you know what? they went to New York. Don really liked it there. They had a chance to make a new start. I can finish in New York. That'd be nice. Hey, Rosie's doing her MD at Columbia. Don's teaching. He's hanging out with his buddy Dave. They're in New York. The end. And then when you pick up to start the sequel, that's what you got to start with. So I could have said, oh, it didn't work out. They went back to, come on, this is the raw material. Fortunately, my wife and I had lived in New York in 2010 for 6-7 months, and I've been coming to New York since the 1980s. So I figured I knew as much about New York as Don Tillman would, and then I made a couple of tax-deductible trips to New York just to visit the places that Don hangs out, to make, like Bellevue Hospital. He has to go to, after that he has to go to Bellevue for an assessment. And I had a particular idea what a psych hospital would be like, and my wife's a psychiatrist, so she knows, but she doesn't know what a New York psych hospital is like, and it's quite different. You see, in Australia you would turn up to be a desk there, but I turned up at outpatients in Bellevue, as you do, and they're all behind bars, like I would think at a bank or something like that, I guess for good reasons. But that was interesting because and the coffee there was, you could get an espresso coffee there, and I didn't end up writing it into the book, but they're the little details that you start to look for so that you can make it real.
Did you have to spend a bunch of time thinking about sort of how it would upset Don's routine to be sort of thrust into the New York life because he's such a creature of habit?
Yeah, look, I don't think he's much of a creature of place, though. Don's a pretty portable sort of guy. Don's life, you just got to find out where the market is to buy the regular food, and where's work, how do I get there, settle into a new routine. But it was funny because I gave a talk in Salt Lake City, and as I was in the process of writing The Rosie Effect, I wrote half of The Rosie Effect in New York, actually, and someone said, we're really worried about Don. Is he going to be okay in New York City or the Big Apple? Because people still have this view of New York as being this real dangerous place and so on. I mean, I find New York one of the friendliest, most accommodating cities in the world. I've just come from London, and the difference is it just jumps out at you that you sit down in a communal sort of coffee shop or something like that, people are talking to you straight away. I was in a bar last night and end up in conversation with a couple of aspiring writers. It's just New York is very open, very friendly, and I guess if you live here all the time you don't notice it, but try going to London and get the cold shoulder or whatever.
What's the most exciting thing about exploring New York as a setting for you?
Well, I guess the thing was that most of the first book is set in Melbourne. Who knows Melbourne, Australia? Who knows Melbourne, Australia? I can write what I like, in a way. But the moment you set something in an iconic city like New York, you've got to bring it to life because people know New York. They've seen it in movies. You can't get it wrong, and you've got to bring something with it. It's very happy. I think the most exciting thing about it's going to sound a little dull, but the most exciting thing about New York is its size. Because I actually live in a neighbourhood in Melbourne, which is actually quite a lot like New York. It's commerce and retail, it's commerce and residential and restaurants and everything, cheek by jowl, all in together. It's trying to be New York and a lot of culture, trying to do that, but it's only small. And the thing with New York is you've got all these neighbourhoods with their own character, and every time I come to New York I try to stay in a different neighbourhood, and it's got its own, So I'm in Soho this time. I've never stayed in Soho before, so I guess it's just the sheer size of it, where you can get to know Melbourne quite quickly.
Right. What did you learn about your characters sort of the second time around with them that you didn't really figure out the first time through?
Wow, that's a tough one. I learnt more about Rosie the second time around than I did Don. Look, I really figured I had Don so nailed that he changes a little. I wanted him to change in the second book, and people say, oh, he's a little more socially competent, that sort of thing. Of course he is. He spent 10 months living in a relationship. He's going to have grown a bit, and he's working hard on it. And one thing I've learned is that high-functioning people with Asperger's, meaning largely people who have jobs, if you want to put in draw a line, they can do anything they want. It's just like it's a lack of some things are harder for people with Asperger's and some things are easier. And but if you work hard at it, and people with Asperger's often have very great concentration. It's like Don's getting there, and I didn't want him to be just unchanged in that way. But I wanted to explore Rosie more. There's a group of people who don't like the Rosie Effect, and they are people who, in my experience, who read only books with female protagonists. So they're sort of okay with the Rosie Project because it's a romance and they're familiar with that. But when you get into the second book, Don's spending a lot of time hanging out with the guys. Now, if you were reading a chick lit book and the protagonist was hanging out with the girls and talking about relationships, cool. You're not saying, where's the guy? Where is he? But for a lot of people, the second book, Rosie's not on the page as much. And not only that, you know what? She's not even being very nice a lot of the time. And this is very deliberate on my part, because in the first book, Rosie is really supporting Don. She's taken him a long way. She's helping him change, she's helping him realise stuff. I wanted to flip it on its head in the second book, because when people said Don couldn't make a marriage last, that famous philosopher Nancy Reagan said, marriage is never 50-50, it's always 90-10. And I wanted the time when Don would have to step up to the plate, not just showing Rosie looking at him after him all the time, but what would really drive Rosie down? I thought, okay, if she had a lot of pressure on it, in her studies, which is her work, imagine if she was to get pregnant, imagine if bad things circumstantially happen, like Jean was to come to live with them, which is about as nasty as it can get. A supervisor, he's a jerk, all that sort of stuff. And a husband's saying, oh, good, I can stay up all night drinking with Jean, and he's deceiving her about the arrest and all that sort of stuff. So she's got a lot of reasons for feeling, as well as him being Don, for feeling a little bit, doing it hard, and then Don has to step up to the plate and do it. But some readers will read that and say, oh, I just don't like Rosie anymore. And give me a break, she's going through a tough time.
Right. How has the Asperger's community responded to the books throughout both of the cycles of the books, and has it changed at all?
I just saw a thumb go up in the audience, which was great, thank you very much. Look, the Asperger's, before I published the Rosie Project, I was really concerned that I did not put out something that caused pain to people in that community. People have got enough challenges without me putting out something that might make people laugh at them. So I circulated it to a number of people I know who identify as having Asperger's syndrome, a number of people, or let me say high functioning autism, okay, or a number of parents of kids who have autism at all levels, and a number of organisations supported. I got nothing but positive feedback. Unbelievable. Everything. Because what they said was, one, he is a not stereotypical but typical person with Asperger's. I mean, there's a lot of people say, oh, but people with Asperger's don't drink. Garbage. Of course they're on average they don't. Don isn't average, he's one individual and he's allowed to drink, okay? And he's allowed to drink a lot and he can have a drinking problem. What? As well as his Asperger's, he's got 2 problems. Yeah, why not? He can have 10 problems. This is, Asperger's may not be a problem. So A, he was typical, and B, it was a sympathetic portrayal because he's the hero. He's the guy who puts his head down and and does stuff. We're laughing though, and the question is, and I understand. One of the things I've learned a lot more is about the techniques of humour and why people are actually laughing. What you laugh at with humour is the unexpected. Say 3 people walk into a bar, an American, a Canadian, and an Australian. You know it's going to be a joke about the Australian. Because he came third, okay? The American's going to do something, the Canadian's going to do the same thing, and the Australian's going to do something different. And since I'm telling a joke, the Australian's going to do something way smarter, okay? And you go, whoa, why didn't we think of that, but he could do something way dumber, It's the unexpected rather than the smartness or dumbness. But Don is the third guy. He walks into a bar, we all expect average person will do something, neurotypical will do something, but Don is going to do something different, and we will laugh because of that element of surprise. Right. The other thing we laugh at in the book, particularly more than the screenplay, is observational comedy. That the observation comedian gets up and says, so what's this about? I mean, what's it about when you have to wear this jacket when you go to a restaurant? I mean, what's that about? See, Don is that guy. Don is saying, what's it about? And he's casting this sort of forensic eye on what we do just socially that we take for granted. And he's saying, well, why do you do that? And you think, oh, actually, which is why we laugh at the observational comedian. But then, quick story, can I get it?
Go for it.
So I've got all this great feedback, and I'm thinking, it's all going to be wonderful. But one day, surely, but it's on launch night. It's the book launch. We're in a bookstore with friends and family and a few other people from the community. I finished the launch of the book, big round of applause, and this guy, just as soon as the applause has died down, we're still going, he walks right up to me and he says, "My name is Daniel, I've got Asperger's syndrome and I've got a problem with your book." I said, "Well, tell me." He says, "Page 33, line 17. He says, Don says he doesn't want a partner who is mathematically illiterate. The word is innumerate. Don Tillman would not make that mistake." And I had a great answer, which Karen will know about, because we actually talked about this, Karen and I, because she spoke the same thing. But a mathematician will actually use the terms differently. Enumerate means can't add, can't subtract, can't count. Mathematically illiterate means can't do calculus, can't do heavy stuff. I said that to him. He said, "Oh, excellent." He said, "I'll take 3 copies." And I said, why 3 copies? And he said, "I want to give it to my friends to show them what it's like to have Asperger's."
American and Canadian.
I want to give it to my friends to show them what it's like to have Asperger's. And I've had an enormous amount of that, not only from that, but the other side. I had a woman in the line not too long ago. A couple of ones. Can I say a quick Asperger's story? So, woman gets to the head of the line, and she says, "My dad. We all figured he had Asperger's. He's an engineer." I've said, but we all figured he had Asperger's, but he wouldn't acknowledge it. We thought it'd be more helpful in our family if he just acknowledged he had it, so we could say, "That's your Asperger's, Dad," whatever. And so we give him these books on Asperger's syndrome, and he say, "That is not me, leave me alone." And so then we gave him the Rosie Project, and he said, "I'm coming out." But another one where a woman gets in front of the line again, and she says, my brother was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome in his 40s. He'd had a tough life, and we finally had a reason. So we all got the books on Asperger's syndrome. He said it wasn't until after he passed that we read the Rosie Project and we actually understood what it was like for him. Because the weird thing is, all these books on Asperger's syndrome have got no empathy. They're all looking at the guy from the outside. They're not saying, "This must be what it's like, this is," and we're getting a little more that's written now by people with Asperger's syndrome. So John Elder Robeson, for example, I've only read his first book. Excellent book, memoir saying this is how I see the world. And one more, okay? I was at an Asperger's conference recently. I was the keynote speaker with Tony Atwood. We were the 2 keynotes. The 2 of us at this Asperger's conference. So I'm doing a little bit in that community now. But normally I do the story of how I became a writer, how I wrote the book and that sort of stuff. And I'm pretty good with that. I know that now. But I had to do that over dinner, and they said, "Next day we want you to talk about working with people with Asperger's and how we can make workplaces better for them and so on," because I have worked with a lot of people, not diagnosed most of them, and I was really nervous. And I got up and I said to this group of people, "Look, I'm conscious, I've got a large audience here of people with Asperger's syndrome, people in the Asperger's community, and I am really worried that I'm going to say something which is offensive or incorrect." I said, "I hope you..." So here I am, the neurotypical, in front of a bunch of people with Asperger's syndrome, worried I'm going to make a faux pas. I said, "I hope you guys see the irony of this." And they did. And something that's really sort of increasingly come home to me is that this is not about right and wrong, not about disability or disorder. It's about difference. And the best line, the line that gets most quoted out of the Rosie Effect is when Don Tillman says, "A world of Don Tillmans would be safe, efficient and pleasant for all of us."
So was it very important to you while you were developing the character of Don to make sure that you were creating a unique character and not a character that sort of spoke for everyone and sort of stood in for everyone?
I don't think I was ever in danger of that because I never studied Asperger's.
Right.
I think the danger is if you study Asperger's, you are going to create, I think, this is being recorded, but I'm going to say it anyway, okay? I think that The Imitation Game is a terrific movie if you've seen it. I really, really think it's a terrific movie. But because I am really focused on the portrayal of Asperger's syndrome, which undoubtedly Alan Turing, as portrayed, has, what I saw in the movie was it almost right, but it was textbook. It felt like a really, really good screenwriter, a really good director, and a really good actor had all read the books. Not that they had hung out for 40 years with people with Asperger's. It just put that point where he says, I don't get jokes. But all the people I know with Asperger's, they have senses of humour. They're not always exactly the same, but yours may not be the same as mine. You know, they have senses of humour. They get jokes. I just think when he says, I don't get jokes, I just thought, no, you've made a robot here. You read something and then you made him say it. So so I never really felt in danger of that. No.
So if you weren't reading and researching about Asperger's, what were you reading during the writing of both of the books?
I did read a couple of Asperger's memoirs because they were real individuals. So I read the John Elder Robeson book, and I read a book about loving someone with Asperger's. So from but I didn't mind how many people I read who were individuals. I just didn't want to read anything that was already a generalisation, an amalgamation, a synthesis of Asperger's.
Were you reading any fiction also?
Look, I probably was reading a certain amount of casual fiction, but I actually try not to read. I don't read much fiction when I'm writing, and there's three reasons for it. One is I need the time. Reading a book when I could be writing is the second one is that it does get in the way of my voice. So if I do read fiction, I try to read something a long way away from what I'm writing. So I read Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass recently, just because it felt a long way away. It wasn't as far as you might have thought. And the third reason is I get discouraged by how good the other writing is, because it's not that I can't do it, but I can't do it in one pass. That my approach to writing is you write a draft and you make it better and you make it better, and one day it is going to be as good as I want it to be, but it's not going to be that at the beginning. And as you're writing, you think, oh God, I'm not writing it. It's not Ulysses at the moment,
What is your process for writing like?
They reckon that writers come from two camps. Pantsers, people who write by the seat of their pants. Okay, so they sit down, they write what Hemingway would have said, one true sentence. And I figure they write a second true sentence, and as they write, plot, characters all emerge. They're just writing beautifully all the way. And when they find the last full stop, in theory, not Hemingway, because Hemingway said the first draft of anything is the S word, but an extreme example is Zadie Smith, who says, I don't know her personally, I'm not impugning her honesty, but it's sexy to write this way, okay? So, famously, Mozart said he didn't do multiple drafts, and Beethoven had his agonised notebook survived, but recently they've decided that Mozart did do multiple drafts, he just didn't tell anyone. So the idea is that the pantser writes by the seat of their pants, makes it up as they go along. The planner does a plan, like a screenwriter. They lay it all out, it's a screenwriter, they lay it out in cards, and so one card for every scene, and then they write. And that's me, because I studied screenwriting, I came out of computing and so on. So you lay it all out in cards, and then you sit down and you don't have to worry about plot, you don't have to worry about character, you can concentrate on writing as well as you can, on getting the one-liners in, all that stuff. So you're not trying to do all the creativity at once. And I studied creativity theory, and that's a good move. I've already done a whole lot of creative work, now I'm just doing the next layer, and then I'll come back and do another layer of review, and another layer, and eventually I'll get something that's passable. So the great thing is you don't get writer's block, because all you do, you know what you have to write. If you're struggling, you just lower your standards, you just keep going, and you come back and make it better later. You get it done.
So I think one thing we're all dying to know about is the Rosie Project movie. What can you tell us?
Okay, well, the great thing is, I said that the sort of almost the motivation to start writing a book, one of the motivations was to get the movie made. But, really, I also wanted to write a book. But, okay, it worked.
It did work.
Once Simon & Schuster, or almost, once Simon & Schuster put up their bid, there was an auction for the American rights to the book, and they were very generous in their offer, that popped up on the radar of the film studios. and I got various offers, and Sony Pictures said, we'll get one of the best screenwriters in Hollywood to adapt your book. I said, hold on. And you know what my agent said? He said, that's very sweet, Graeme, but we had a discussion and I got the gig. So yeah, they said, oh, it's not so bad, that screenplay. You have 5 years of work, it wasn't so bad. So they took my screenplay, and they have now assigned, I did 2 more rewrites of it under my contract, and they have now assigned producers to it. They were there already. Then they now assigned directors, and think, they're Chris Lord and Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who did the Lego Movie, 21 Jump Street, and so on. So they're A-list guys. They said, we want our favourite screenwriters to look at it. Let me say, it was never going to get through Hollywood without a lot of people looking at it, meaning rewrite it. It's okay. And they got the guys who did, they got Scott Neustadter and Michael Webber, who did 500 Days of Summer, The Fault in Our Stars, Me Before You, which is coming up. So again, A-list.
Nothing anyone's ever heard of.
Yeah. So these are the guys, and I believe they now have a script which the studio is happy with. Not sure the directors are totally happy yet. I'm not. People say, how do you feel about your script being touched? I studied screenwriting. I made movies, short films and that. You understand that making a movie is a collaborative process, and you as a screenwriter are fairly well down the order. I would like the best movie possible to be made, and I'd like to be part of it.
Cool. So are they casting?
There it is. There's the question. Look, sometimes I go to the bookstore, I put $50 on the counter, and I say, if nobody asks me who you want to play Don Tillman in the movie, you can keep the $50. I've never lost it. It's the favourite question. No, it hasn't been cast yet. I have no official say in the casting. I have no official say in anything, except if they use my screenplay, I get a credit. The names that get kicked around all the time are names like Benedict Cumberbatch, Steve Carell, Paul Rudd.
Again, anyone has ever
Ewan
heard
McGregor, Ryan Gosling. Yeah, they're all actors, because we have seen those actors play roles like we imagined Don Tillman would be. But for me, it's even more exciting. Look, they'd all do a fine job, I'm sure. It's even more exciting if they cast someone against type, someone you wouldn't expect. I mean, you think of Russell Crowe in A Beautiful Mind. Imagine. Yeah, Hugh Jackman.
He should be Australian if he's going to keep.
Well, I think it will almost certainly be an American story, and I don't mind that.
Okay.
I don't mind that. It is not, I didn't set out to make Don Australian, And in fact, I was talking at the counter with it was Dan or with Michael, I think, at the counter. Sorry, Michael, about the changes to the book for the American edition, and we actually changed some of the Australian slang that's in the book, because I'm not trying to write Crocodile Dundee. I'm not trying to write things in your faces. Oh, how cute that is Australian. I don't want you to stumble. And the example I gave was in the Australian edition, Trevor, Don's brother, says he's having a lend of you, Mum. Who knows what that means? It means he's kidding you. He's having a lend of you. He's kidding. I didn't want you to stop. Say, look, I've got to look up the Australian dictionary. I'll have to work it out. I just wanted you to read the story as an international sort of story, but it'll be an international story.
Fantastic. I would love to take some questions if anybody has.
We have a mic to pass around for you guys.
Thank you so much for writing. I read both books, but I had a question. Don seems like an excellent chef, and I Googled a standardized meal program. So I was interested on where you got the inspiration for making him such a great chef and the inspiration for the program.
Okay, look, I'm going to answer a really big question here first, okay? Because people sometimes ask me, where did Don Tillman come from? And I often answer that he was inspired by a friend of mine. But the thing is, inspired by is different from equal to. So I would say, they say a character is a third someone you know, a third yourself, and a third you make up. And it's almost the same thing with incidents that happen. So the jacket incident really happened, sort of. with the very friend who inspired Don. It happened in New York City, and it was a top steakhouse in the 1980s. This happened. And you had to wear a jacket. And the only moment, and we went through a whole sort of, it was a great story, but it was nothing like it is in the book, except for that moment where my friend said to me, my jacket is superior to yours in all respects, okay? My jacket is better than yours, it's visible in low light, it's waterproof. And I just took that moment, because it was such a funny moment, and put that, and built it up from there. Now, the standardised meal system, has got a bit of me in it because I really like to cook. Okay, so and you know what? I actually jog to the market. I jog. We live just a short distance from a market, and I can have a jog to the market and jog back with a backpack of food, and by the time I've done that, I've got dinner ready. I've got the ingredients for dinner. I've had some exercise for the day. It's not a bad way of doing things. I'm usually pretty much the only jogger in the market with a backpack. Okay, so there's a little bit Don Tillman, a bit of me there. But the idea of the standardised meal system, it was a former girlfriend's mum. And she had 4 kids. She was a single mum. She was working. She had no time to make up recipes or do fancy. So she just said, she had a standardised meal system. Sunday it was roast lamb. Monday it was lamb rissoles or whatever. It was just like, that was it. And the kids, they were pretty happy with that. They knew Wednesday it was going to be whatever it was. So it might be a good day to go out with your friends, And she just did that. So I borrowed it from there.
Time for a couple more questions if anyone has anything to ask.
I'm sorry.
You're the guy who just walked in, aren't you? You're the walk-in.
Yes,
What's
yes,
going
I
on?
have to,
I love that.
So I have to read those 2 books, but I know you had mentioned about writing first book in 4 weeks. Is that correct? What about the second?
4 weeks and 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because it was the 5 years working on plot, character, and thinking constantly about motivations and all those sorts of things. The second book took me almost exactly a year from first words on the page, or even first planning it, right, to submission. And then I had several months because I had 7 editors working on it, Karen. Because all the overseas, all the international publishers who put up serious advances, they're not, they feel they have a right to read it and comment on it. And nobody's telling me what to do, but they're saying, wouldn't it be good if, or gee, where's Rosie gone, or we don't like the start, all that sort of stuff. And then someone says, I love the start. Someone says, I hate the start. So they forget them, they cancel each other out. Not quite, but I've got to think about the start. But then you get 2 people who say the same thing, and you've got to take it. You'd be crazy if you didn't take that seriously. It was 2 experts. These are smart people. So it took a little while after that as well. But there was this crazy. Actually, this is a good question because it gave me a chance to give a more romantic view of me as a writer. Because you're going to leave here and say, this guy Simsion, what's he like as a writer? And say, he's really dull. He plots all out in cards, lowers his standards. I mean, he writes like he was writing a computer program. He's really structured and boring. So let me romanticise a little bit for you. I'd written part of the Rosie Effect by December 2013. Okay, that's right. Yep. And then my wife and I had a vacation, 3 weeks in New York City, and I was not going to do any writing. And I thought, what? You crazy, Graeme? You're in New York City. The book is set in New York City. You should be writing. So I thought, I've got 40,000 words to go. I'm here for 20 days. If I wrote 2,000 words a day, I could kill this sucker. And Karen's looking at me saying, 2,000 words a day, Graeme, nobody writes 2,000 words a day consistently. On a great day, you might write 2,000 words, but you don't write 2,000 words every day for 20 days to finish half a book. So I said to my wife, this is how I'm going to motivate myself. Any day that I do not, how Don drinks a lot? Yeah, that's me. So any day I fail to write 2,000 words, I'm not drinking. Okay? She said, you can't motivate yourself with alcohol. She's a psychiatrist, remember? And I said, just watch me. And I didn't miss a single day. Christmas Day, big day for us. I woke up and my wife says, you're up early? Haven't you got a hangover? And I said, yeah, but I got 2,000 words to write before lunch. So anyway, you can tell people if they ask how I write that the Rosie Effect was largely written in a 20-day alcohol-fueled jag in New York City. Okay.
Just a follow-up. Was the screenplay written before you finished the novel, or was it after?
Okay, so the Rosie Project, because there's no screenplay for the Rosie Effect, the Rosie Project screenplay was absolutely done, dusted before I started the novel. It had won a prize, it was registered, all that sort of stuff. But afterwards, I tidied up it before I submitted it to Sony, and then I did a couple of redrafts, paid redrafts for Sony. So it's now changed. In many ways, it's changed back to come closer to the novel, because when I wrote the novel, I changed stuff.
And which one did you find easier to write?
Well, the novel was much easier to write because I'd already done most of the work in the form of the screenplay. So it's all. But if you ask me which way is easier to write a story, a screenplay or a novel, I'm going to upset any screenwriters here, but it's easier to write as a screenplay because you're not doing the whole job. A screenplay is only a template for a movie. And there's going to be a whole lot of other creatives that are going to come in and do stuff. So as an example, in the screenplay, I didn't have to locate it. I just say, a big city. Now, in the book, I've got to set it in Melbourne, I've got to describe it, I've got to say what it's like, I've got to put Jimmy Watson's wine bar in there, whereas it's just a wine bar when he goes into the wine bar in the screenplay, because somebody else some set designer is going to work out what that wine bar looks like. In the book, I've got to make that wine bar live. I've got to do everything.
I just remember some of the funny stories, like the jacket story was really funny, but then also when he was the bartender for the reunion and things like. Was there any story that you left out that you kind of wish that you would have put in there, like one of his funny stories?
Yeah. There's a whole lot of stories I left out that actually you cut out.
Just one.
I'm trying to think. You're after the director's cut. Deleted scenes.
Exactly.
I'm really struggling to think of one because you sort of wipe them out of your mind. Because there were lots. There was the bit in New York City. He visits the site of the World Trade Center, and it gets a little tiny mention in the book. But I actually played that all the way through with his conversations with the fire guy and that sort of thing. They visit the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York City, and that's not in the book. So one of the things that I did when my editor said to me, she didn't really change the book much, but she said less of this and more of that. So there was so the New York City stuff shrunk, and things like when he's serving the drinks, the scene that you liked. She said, "Hey, you can roll around on that a bit more because in the movie, so in the dancing, she said you can roll around on that, have a lot of fun with that, stretch it out. We're having fun, really stretch it. So let Rosie and Bianca have a little cat fight and all that sort of stuff. So all that, yeah."
All right, well, that just about does it for tonight's programming. On behalf of the Strand, thanks so much to Graeme and Meredith for being here. Have a hand.